Hey everybody, welcome to another segment of A Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is called The Journey from a Conceptual Understanding of A Course in Miracles to a True Experience of its teachings. So it's that leap between understanding the concepts intellectually and then coming to a true experience of its teachings. We all start, most of us start with a conceptual understanding, right? We slowly but surely start to think about the concepts of the Course, be that, the atonement or time is a big one, forgiveness, oneness of heaven, how special relationships work, special hate, special love relationships, the separation from God, the tiny mad idea, and such, right? Those are all conceptual ideas that in and of themselves don't have meaning. They only have meaning for us because we are, in one way, speaking the language of the Course, right? We're drawn to the Course because of the content, but we're also kind of familiar with the terminology a little bit already, right? We know what, if we're Catholic, we have a lot of terms: sin, fear, guilt, maybe a little psychology. So the language is kind of geared towards our understanding. And it makes sense, right? Because as the Course says, the miracle, if it is expressed right, it has to be expressed in the language that the receiver can understand, right? The receiver of the miracle has to, the miracle has to be expressed in a language that the receiver can understand, right? If I don't speak a certain language, I can't express the miracle to make the other person understand and filter it in, and it loses the potency of the miracle. So the miracle, if we're a miracle worker and we perform a miracle, right, it has to be expressed in the language that the receiver can understand. If we just go to a person and talk in Course language, that is not very helpful, right? If we go to somebody and say, hey, sickness is a defense against the truth, it is not helpful, usually. So the way of the Course would be to translate, for us to get to a certain point where we don't need the terminology anymore. We can talk in very plain language. We don't even have to talk about anything spiritual, right? We talk to somebody else in their framework, in their frame of reference, right? If somebody's a soccer fan or a football fan, or if somebody plays pool, or whatever it is that the language the other person speaks, that is what we then slip into and interact with the person on their terms. Just as Jesus does the same thing with the Course. He talks to us in a language we can understand to convey something that is beyond language, right? That's the kind of oxymoron with the Course. The Course comes in a language that is relatively specific. We have all the Freudian psychology, we have the Christian language, we have the mythology, and it all comes in a kind of a package to submit a content that goes beyond the language, which is the love that is in our right mind, right? Symbolized by Jesus. So any terms in the course are simply there to convey something that is beyond those words. So if we get bogged down by the terminology of the course, right? Oh no, it's sin, it's guilt and it's fear, and I'm guilty of that also. I tend to be too rigorous with the terminology, and I realize that I'm looking at it that a lot of people have different interpretations of what guilt is, for example, right? What is guilt for them, or the belief in sin? There's like, what is it? I can't wrap my head around it, right? So we learn with the course to talk about something else. Maybe we talk about the weather, or we talk about something else, or from a different angle that uses different words. But basically, the conceptual understanding of the course and all its principles, which make sense within the course, right? And they help us. But that's not what we really need. That's just to kind of prepare our mind to then send a message through that is the helpful message. Not the form of the language, not the sin, guilt, and fear attack concepts, tiny mad idea, and all that. I'm thinking about what if somebody doesn't have any notion of sin at all? How can they get home, if they don't understand sin, when the course is so intent on us understanding it, right? As the number one item of the ego, right? The most embattled principle in the ego thought system is the belief in sin. But that concept is meaningless to somebody else, right? All this, everything we're talking about here is only for us as course students to remove our blocks. And once our blocks are removed, then we can speak in the language that the other person can understand, right? In a language that makes sense to them. If somebody's a soccer fan, then we can talk in soccer terms. Or if we happen to be maybe a soccer fan as well, or if it's, whatever the terminology is of the receiver, that's where we go. So in one sense, and that's hard for me, is the journey would be from the conceptual understanding, from all the terms, and let those terms go. We understand those terms, we know what they mean, and then go past them to what's the actual message, right? And the actual message is always, we are forgiven, right? In whatever words or acts or thoughts this is being expressed, the message of the course is always that you are forgiven, right? The Son of God is guiltless, and in his innocence is his salvation. In the Manual for Teachers, section 1, who are God's teachers? In paragraph 3, it says, there's a course for every teacher of God. The form of the course varies greatly, right? It varies greatly. We come from different backgrounds with different languages and symbols that we work with. So do the particular teaching aids. The teaching aids vary very greatly. The course is a teaching aid. All the symbols within the course are teaching aids. If somebody's a traditional Christian, different symbols, they mean something else. Sin or salvation or atonement means something completely different to a traditional Christian, right? And we can't get into arguments about it because we're talking about two different things and both mean nothing, because there's some message behind it that is, as the course says, the content of the course never changes. Its central theme is always God's Son is guiltless, and in his innocence is his salvation. And however this message is being conveyed, that is the ultimate goal of the course, is for us to learn the course, learn all the concepts, right? Study them, work with them, apply them, until we come to a point where we pass through them. They're no longer needed. And then we speak in the language that the other person can understand. And that is the healing miracle. Then that's what happens then, right? When the love expresses itself, when we don't have a block anymore, the love comes through us in a language that the other person then can completely understand. And that would be the miracle, right? So for us, yes, it's very important to learn all those concepts, because what that does is it gives us a framework to have that block, which is guilt, removed from the awareness of love's presence. Once we are aware of love's presence within us, we don't need none of this. We don't need any of this anymore, right? This can only carry us so much. That's why at some point it says in the course, forget the world, forget this course, and come with holy empty hands unto your God, right? Forget this world, forget this course, forget this course, right? Which means don't forget the content, but forget the form of the course. The form is only specific to us, course students, so that we learn within this framework the course gives us that we're forgiven. That's why we're looking at the guilt. That's why we're making all those connections, right? That we're identified with the body. And yes, I want to be identified because I believe in my own sin and all that. We learn all that because that's our language, right? That is our frame of reference. Otherwise, we wouldn't be course students. But the learning is past that. It's on the other side of that board. The learning is that we're forgiven, that we realize we become aware of the presence of love within us again. And once we become aware of the presence of love within us again, this falls away and this falls away. We don't have to be taught about this or this anymore. We don't need the tiny mad idea. We don't need this whole concept anymore. We go past it, right? It's still internalized within us, but the expression outwardly then is in the language of the 5-year-old that wants to learn how to play a guitar, right? We become universalists. Nothing to do with the universe, but we're going to be universally applicable, right? The ideal teacher of God forgets the course. Has nothing, we're no longer in the course terminology. That is just for us, right? We're now going past that into a realm that we're opening ourselves up to whoever is in front of us, and we're speaking in the language that that person can understand. If we're talking to a waitress in a cafe, we might talk about how great the food is, right? Or we might give a little more tip, or whatever it is that conveys the message that we are forgiven. We don't need to tell that person, hey, sin isn't real, don't worry about it. He's like, what are you talking about, right? I'm a Buddhist. I'm not a Christian, right? So we don't use the terms of the course for healing. The terms of the course only are there so that we can accept the healing, right? And then we go through that, which could be a lifetime, right? 20, 30, 40 years, whatever long it is. We go through that with the language of the course, learning it, going past the language, past all those concepts, to this place of an experience of the love of Jesus or God within us, right? So I think I went past that other one now. So when the course says in the clarification of terms, right, in the manual for teachers, it says, this is not a course in philosophical speculation, nor is it concerned with precise terminology. That's why sometimes Jesus is like, when he says, you made the world, right? He's like, wait a minute. In other places he says, I didn't make the world, I made the world, or you didn't make the world. And it's slightly confusing until we realize that the terms themselves Jesus uses loosely, like loosey-goosey, right? Sometimes he says that's that, sometimes he says it's that. It also depends on where we are right now in the process. Sometimes we learn a certain concept that then later on falls away, and he lifts it up to another level, and he presents another idea there. Like, for example, when he says, hold on. And so he says, for example, swear not in chapter 29, section 6. He says, swear not to die, you holy Son of God. Right? What do we do with a sentence like that? Swear not to die, you holy Son of God. This sentence is on a level that we're probably not, we can get a little hint of what he says, right, deep down inside. Swear not to die, you holy Son of God. But we don't know yet the full implications that this sentence has. That comes much later, maybe in 10 years. When we read this, we're like, oh, I know now what he says, right? I experience what he says. I went from the theoretical understanding of a concept to an actual experience of what this sentence means. Swear not to die, you holy Son of God. You make a bargain that you cannot keep. Right? It opens up a whole thing that we're not going to talk about today. But so the course is written on so many levels, and when we go through some of those earlier lessons, whatever they are, the framework of the course starts to change a little bit, right? Some things fall away, others become more in focus. Maybe we'll spend a year on death, right? Because we have people dying in our lives, or we're afraid of dying, or then we have symptoms, so we spend some time on that, or we have relationships that are in trouble, or anything like that. So we go into certain lessons, we go in and out, and we learn those concepts, and we apply them as best as we can, and then we move on. Right? Some of the earlier concepts they already have fulfilled their purpose, and we don't have to think about those anymore. Right? Either we have internalized them, or that topic right now is not on the list. We have moved on to another classroom. Right? So some of the concepts become more prevalent in the future, that we don't understand what he's saying right now, right? But what it is in the end, once we pass through those seemingly theoretical concepts, is we arrive at an experience. And that is what the course leads to, right? He says this is not a course on philosophical speculation, nor is it concerned with precise terminology. And then he says further down, paragraph 2, theological considerations as such are necessarily controversial, since they depend on belief and can therefore be accepted or rejected, right? If you think about, you might reject some of the concepts in the course. Right? Swear not to die, you holy Son of God. We're like, oh, I don't know what this means. Right? We might reject certain aspects of the course. because they are based on belief. Like, so those concepts, they are all based on belief. If I talk to my daughter about the course and I told her that she's in grad school and she was talking about painting, because she's a painter, and she's talking about the exploitation of things that you paint. So you paint something, a flower, and you exploit it when you paint it. You paint something from a different culture, and you exploit the culture that way. And I was like, whoa, this is really an advanced kind of thinking of, it's not a comfortable place to be in, but it's really like, wow, this is, not a lot of people would think about that too. If I paint something, I'm exploiting the thing I'm painting, right? And I just said, you're starting probably, or maybe you're starting to have that veil that is everywhere. Everything is in this exploitation, right? Whatever we look at, we kind of exploit. And there's this veil that you're starting to drop. And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, but anyway, so that would be an example of using the course terms. I mean, it was a good talk, but using the course terms for, for not for somebody else's benefit, but for just to have my idea give to her, right? Rather than being in her idea and exploring what she says with her language, right? But nobody's perfect, right? So we're working on that. But so in general, the theological considerations, which are all those concepts in the course, right, are necessarily controversial because they are based in belief, right? It's not, the course is not the truth. None of what the course says is true, right? The only truth in the course is when it says God is. That's it. Everything else is based on our frame of reference. When Jesus spends 1,200 pages to talk to us in a way we can understand, even though not at the beginning, but over our lifetime, we can begin to understand it, and then go beyond that language to an experience of his love, right? And then this is the famous sentence. I don't know why it's famous, but I feel like it's famous. A universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is not only possible, but necessary. It is this experience toward which the course is directed. Here alone, consistency becomes possible, because here alone, uncertainty ends. It's so beautiful, right? So a universal theology is impossible. That sentence, if everybody would agree to that sentence, there would be no religious wars. Because we would realize a theology can never be universal. Right? A universal theology is impossible because we have so many symbols. Sometimes somebody comes from a background with no God at all in their background. They have no clue about anything. They never went to school. They never had the terms. And then you have somebody that grew up in a pastor's home or priest's home or minister, right? Those two can't get together because the terminology is completely different. If the minister insists on the Christian terminology, they will do a bad job telling the other party that does not have that background that they are forgiven. But if the minister would let go of all the concepts of the Christian terminology and go to the level of the other person, the healing would happen. So all the missionary things in Christianity completely miss the point, utterly miss the point. Not to mention that probably whoever they minister to is more advanced than the person who's ministering. Because if you think you're ministering to somebody in your own language and make them learn your language so that they can be saved, it's like the opposite of a miracle. Right? If somebody would go to, if a minister would go to another culture and would completely blend into that culture, that would be the ministry. Because the symbols of the Course or of the Bible or Buddhism or whatever it is, Freudian psychology, right? Behavioral psychology. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is just a framework for us and not a framework for the one who we're talking to. Right? In order for the miracle to be effective, it has to be expressed in the language that the receiver can understand. That's why Jesus goes through 1,200 pages to explain something to us that he says, you know what, this isn't totally true. I'm telling you a lie. But this lie will get you to a point where you can experience my love. And that's the end of my teaching. Once you experience my love, I'm moving on to somebody else. Right? Because that's it. Once you know you're forgiven, the awareness of love will return to your mind. The miracle will express itself in a way that somebody else can understand, and that's the end of it. You will be at peace, and everybody else can partake in it as much as they can accept at that moment. But it won't matter to you. Right? You're just you, and the other person can accept the love that comes through or not. It has nothing to do with you. Right? And if we're fully aware of the love within us, it would not matter. It would not matter what language we speak or what symbols we use. My ex-wife's father was a dentist in Manhattan, and he had a really good practice. He practiced until he was almost 80. And his spiel was, he would look, he had 10 or 12 greetings in different languages. And if somebody from China would walk in speaking Chinese, he would speak Chinese to them and say, hey, how are you? How are you doing today? Right? If somebody comes from Italy, he would say, whatever, right? And so he would speak in the language that the person, and I mean, what more can you do, right? That is half of the dentistry appointment is already done, right? Because people sit down on the dentist chair and they realize, okay, I'm forgiven. Because, not because what he said, but it's the intention, right? And that's just a very small example of that. But the core for us course students, I think, is to realize that this universal theology is not possible. A universal course language is completely impossible and completely unnecessary, right? It makes no difference. Ken always said the message doesn't have to go out, the message has to go in. Right? If we are concerned with our process within ourselves to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence within us, that is literally everything, nothing else we have to do. Because if we come from our right mind, if we're miracle-minded, literally miracle-minded, we will automatically express the love in the language the other person will understand. There is no other way, because if you're in your right mind, none of those concepts are important. The moment you're in the right mind, the course is gone. There's no more course talk. Because the symbols of the course only get us to the point of the experience. Once we have the experience of love, we will automatically express it in the way the other will understand. We become like Jesus, right? In the beginning, he told Helen that he is responsible for the miracles, right? So a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is not only possible but necessary. So the universal experience is that we are forgiven. And you can see it if you watch like YouTube shorts, it happens all over the world. Those moments caught on camera, right? When we know, oh my God, there's some forgiveness going on, right? Like a soldier returns home and his son is playing baseball and he turns around and he sees him and there's people around him start to cry and whatever. Those are those small moments, right, where there's this moment of forgiveness, right? That means there's a universal experience. That experience that you have there, that is a universal experience. It's the same when you go to a Taylor Swift concert, right? Everybody that goes there will tell you that this is a universal experience that goes beyond the song lyrics or the songs or Taylor Swift or whoever, right? It goes beyond that to an experience that is totally unifying. That experience of love in the right mind is universal. How we get there is completely individualized because we all have very different symbols, backgrounds, how we grew up, how we process information is so different, right? My language is completely different from any other language. My symbols are very specific, but the experience then comes through when I forget all that. Right? We're beyond the universal theology. The theology is a vehicle. The concepts of the course, all of this that we do every week, is a vehicle. In and of itself, if we raise it up on a throne, we're as far away from the truth as we can possibly be. Right? The language, the terminology of the course is for us. We want to go from here, to Boston. We're taking a bus to Boston. That bus is the course terminology. When we arrive in Boston, the bus to Boston has fulfilled its purpose. The terminology of the course will end. Once we're at the experience level, the course terminology will no longer be important. We might still use it, and with groups and other people that do the course and stuff, of course, but that is then an expression of the love that is in the language the other person can understand. Because we're all course students, right? We can talk to each other in that language, but that language is absolutely meaningless. All those concepts here are only meaningful until we get to Boston. Once we're in Boston, the bus or this terminology has fulfilled its purpose. And this gets me to my favorite sentence in the course. I think it's going to be on my gravestone with no name. It says, nothing survives its purpose. Right? Nothing survives its purpose. Once the purpose of something is fulfilled, whatever it is no longer alive. right? It falls away. If we take a cab to the airport, we arrive at the airport, the cab has fulfilled its purpose. Sometimes that happens with a relationship. Sometimes it happens with a job, with thoughts that we had. Sometimes we have concepts of something, and those concepts get us to a certain point, and all of a sudden it's over, right? Perhaps you have experienced that. Our previous house, we lived there for 12 years, and it was great. We loved it and everything. And the moment we moved to the other house, I had no thoughts for that house anymore. It was weird. We talked about it. It was like strange. I don't think about that house at all, and it was great. But it fulfilled the purpose, and it falls away once the purpose has fulfilled. When you die, right, the body has fulfilled its purpose, and it will be laid down, because the purpose of learning this course, of learning those concepts and then go beyond them to the love, has been reached. The need for the body will no longer be there, and it will be laid down, not in fear, but in gentle acknowledgement that we learned it, right? I don't know where this is, this line. I think it's in the Song of Prayer. I can't find it now. But it's basically, this is how death should be. You know, we realize the body has fulfilled its purpose. It has brought us to a point past which we cannot go inside this body. Right? And the same is with everything. It's with every spiritual concept. Right? Once it brings us to a point, the early lessons in the workbook, or the early chapters in the course, once they bring us to the point where they are supposed to bring us, they have fulfilled their function. The course itself, once it brings us to the point of that we realize we can now freely decide for Jesus, which was not possible before, because we felt so guilty, we were so afraid of that love. Once we're past the fear, we can decide freely for Jesus and for the Holy Spirit, which those names will no longer mean anything. It'll just be an experience of love that is universal. We will no longer need the course. We might read in it and we might love every line of it, because now we have no blocks. And once the blocks are removed, I believe every line we read in the course will carry the love that is there. We're just blocking it. So in the end of our journey with the course, every page of the 1200 pages, we will have an experience of love, because we went past the symbols. The symbols no longer matter. Right? We would read a sentence, forgiveness will not change him, yet time waits upon forgiveness, and we will feel the love, and the words will go in the background and dissolve. Right? All the concepts of the course in the end will dissolve and will leave us with an universal experience of love. It's very hard to type philosophical quickly without mistakes. And then the course says in clarification of terms, the introductions, we're going back to that, about the philosophical framework. He says in the third paragraph, it says, this course remains within the ego framework where it is needed. And this is now where we come to, how do we get from a theoretical understanding to an experience, right? We can't actively try to do that. Right? If we have a concept in our mind that says, okay, we're the Son of God, we're the Christ, and we are one self with our Creator and all that stuff, that's all good. But that's not where the Course, that's not the purpose of the Course. The purpose of the Course stops before that. Right? If we're caught in that philosophical framework of I'm one, I'm in the oneness, I'm this one consciousness, and I'm this and that, we're not there. Right? Right, Ember? We're not there. How to get there is to look at all those, look at this, right? Look at our guilt, because that is the block, and don't worry about all those concepts of the oneness of heaven and the one Christ and all that. The Course is not concerned about that. It touches on it a little bit here and there, but the concern is the block that prevents our awareness from being directed toward love. That is what the concern of the Course is, right? This Course remains within the ego framework where it is needed. There's no lofty level in the Course. Right? It's plain and simple. Look at guilt. That's it. There's nothing bigger than that, because it's not needed, right? That experience of that universal experience of love will come when we have let go of the block, right? And any kind of theological discussions, they are great, but they don't get us there. What gets us there is to realize why we're not there and why we can't decide for it, right? Which in the Course's framework is our belief in sin and guilt, and then the fear, right? That's what we need to focus on. And this, when it says this Course remains within the ego framework where it is needed, right? Don't try to do lofty things, right? Do the work, right? Carry the bag from the field into the barn. Go back, carry it back into the barn. That's it, right? We don't need to be concerned with theological speculations of how it is, how it could be, what it is. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't get us there. What gets us there is to realize I'm not there. I don't want to be there because I'm so afraid of it, right? So that's why it says this Course remains within the ego framework where it is needed. The Course is needed in the ego framework. Once we're past the ego, the Course is no longer needed, right? It is not concerned with what is beyond all error. The Course is not concerned with oneness, with heaven, with love, with the Christ, with eternity, with our one self. It's not concerned about that, right? It is not concerned with what is beyond all error, because it is planned only to set the direction toward it. It's not even to reach it, to set our direction towards it, right? There's one line when the Course says in the end, very end of the clarification of terms, it says, this Course is a beginning, not an end. We do the Course, we learn it as best as we can, we spend years and years and years on it, but then it lifts us to a point where we go further, and the concepts of the Course are with us, but they're moving on. They're moving into bigger spheres. right? It is not concerned with what is beyond all error, not concerned about the truth, only concerned about the error. And the plan of the Course is to set the direction towards it. Therefore, it uses words which are symbolic and cannot express what lies beyond symbols. All the words in the world cannot express what lies beyond the symbols, because words are twice removed from reality. The words were made to limit love, not to express it. The original purpose of words, of communication between separated parts, is to not unify, is to separate. And we can use them with the Holy Spirit for something else, but initially words, just like the body, were made so that the separation would stay intact, right? Words separate. Silence, the silence of the Holy Spirit is what gets us closer. And then we can use words in that way too. But the Courses, the use for words which are symbolic, cannot express what lies beyond it. If I say I love you, it can't express the experience. Right? It limits it. Can only go so far. And the Course's concepts can only go so far. And then it says it is merely the ego that questions, because it is only the ego that doubts, right? The Course merely gives another answer once a question has been raised. However, this answer does not attempt to resort to inventiveness or ingenuity, right? These are the attributes of the ego, this genius, all those, oh wow, lofty ideas, right? The Course is simple. It has one function and one goal. Only in that does it remain wholly consistent, because only that can be consistent. And the goal of the Course is to get us onto this path with Jesus or the Holy Spirit, right? To realize we can make a choice for Jesus and the Holy Spirit, even though we're not able to make that choice for a while, right? It's only to set our mind towards that goal. And the message that always keeps with us is that we're forgiven, right? We're completely forgiven when we're on this journey, because the journey is only in our imagination, right? It's literally an imaginary journey that we took from this belief in sin all the way down to where we are right now. It's an imaginary journey. So Jesus comes up with imaginary concepts within this Course to lead us back this imaginary ladder, and beyond that ladder is the experience of his love. And that is the only truth there is, right? And then we're back in the awareness of love's presence. So one kind of prayer would be, if we don't understand something in the Course, right, which is very, very common. I mean, I have so many things that I'm like, I don't know what this means. And we all have that, right? And we can get bogged down by it. We're like, oh, I don't get it. How can I learn this Course? If we remember at that moment that it's not about the concept, it's not about understanding the concept, it's the experience. And we can ask Jesus ourselves, right? We can ask for an experience. And an experience will completely answer all the questions. We will in one instant understand the Course completely, because the only understanding of the Course is a universal experience of love. That's it. All those concepts, all those 1,200 pages dissolve when this experience of love happens. The words are no longer there. They have fulfilled their purpose, right? And then we go back, because the attraction of guilt is still there. We go back, and we go back and forth for a while. But if we are stuck in some concepts or stuck in some situation, and we can't get any further, and our brain is like fogged, right? If we can ask for an experience and say, please, I want an experience. I don't know what this all theoretical mumbo jumbo is. I want an experience. And if we really mean it, we'll have it, right? If we can let go of the fear a little bit, that's what the miracle does, right? It gets us back to that decision-making point, and we can make it another choice. And that is what we can do for others. If you know what we said in the beginning, if you're a miracle worker, which the first chapter 1, he talks about being a miracle worker. That's just the very beginning of our journey, right? To think about that. But Ken used to say, I have my friend Elke, she was talking to him about her practice, and he told her, because she says, I don't know what to tell people, my clients and stuff. And he said, just give them an experience of the love, right? And that's the universal truth. So, and when you were in Ken's presence, when I was at the foundation, really, that was all he was about. I mean, he was talking to people, to 100 students in the dining room, right? All speaking different languages, like literally speaking different languages. He would come and he would massage your neck, and he's like, oh, this is where the guilt is. And like, oh my God. But he would talk, and you would feel that was his goal, is for us to have an experience of this love. Right, that's it. He could have been the mailman. He could have been anybody in any occupation. Could be behind the counter in a deli. Right? He would give you a sandwich, and you would have an experience of his love, of the love of Jesus. Right? And that's the ultimate goal of the Course, to bring us to that point where we still live in this world. We still have seemingly limitations, right? Our body, our everything. But the moment we get in touch with the right mind, we can then express the love that is there in a way that is 100% on the level of the recipient. There's no theoretical framework for that anymore. There's just a universal experience that is expressed by this. I have this one person in my office. I think she's 80. She works still in real estate, and she's very religious, and I kid around with her all the time about, hey, I didn't see you at church at 5 a.m. I was there. Where were you? Right? And so we have this banter, and I realized that's it. There's nothing else. There's no concept of, oh God, God doesn't even know we're here, or Jesus didn't die for our sins, whatever. It means nothing, right? She's a very funny person. And to just talk to her in that way, I can feel that is what the healing is, right? I'm not able to do that throughout across the board, but there's some people I can do it with, and it's very clear that is the miracle, right? To express the love in a way that is receivable and manageable by the other person, whatever that is. It can be just a smile. It can be, hey, I'll pick up your groceries, or it can be something that is nothing what we could, say in this world. Oh, you didn't do anything for this person, right? It could be a very, very small gesture, very small in the eyes of the world thing. It's not heroic. It can be a tiny little thing. It can be a nod. It could be a word, right? The expression, once we're in the right mind, that there's no more concepts, so we can express the love however the recipient can receive it without fear. All right, I think that's all from me. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time. Let me see if this works. No.